Take one.
Hello! And live from the church sanctuary, it's the Northwoods Assembly Bible Study with PB&G.
I'm not 100% sure that part was live.
That's okay. It was live.
It's gotta be
It
live.
wasn't
It
live.
was spinning.
I don't know.
It's just now live, so.
Well, take a look and see if that showed up.
If you're
Otherwise,
just joining
do it
us, you
again.
missed all kinds of good stuff.
You are.
See? There you go.
Is the sound too loud, distorted?
Yeah, you're a little distorted.
I'm not 100% sure you think so.
Sweetheart, if you go to the Logitech,
I can't believe when I said you're a little distorted, you didn't say Mr. and Mrs. Distorted had a little
Mr. and Mrs. Distorted had a baby, it was a little distorted. See, that's a joke, Wendell. Okay.
Where am I going?
Go to Logitech.
People are watching.
I know it's bad when you have to explain the punchline, but is it bad?
Just open the Logitech
Is
program,
that bad?
down at the bottom is the microphone.
Is
You see
that
it?
bad as well?
Lower right-hand side.
I
That's not a
see
good
it.
sign.
Turn it down even more than it already is.
More or
Turn it
less.
down to just a wee little
Turn it
bit.
so there's less more.
Because Pastor's really loud.
Okay.
He's got a big
I
mouth.
need to hear what it sounds like. If I,
Is it down even more?
yeah, if I go any farther down, we're going to be
All right. Well, it's probably going to pick us up because it
Finally.
seems to be.
People
Seems
think
to be.
I'm miming.
Turn it up, yeah.
Okay.
Say something.
Wee. See, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's even picking you up.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, maybe we should
All
like
that.
see
Well, we could kill some time. We could. I don't know. You got any jokes or anything?
something. Thanks for joining us for technical difficulties,
All
Albert.
right.
Oh, I didn't know we were. Oh, Brian Davison's laughing.
Well, his dad is Lincoln. I mean, that's funny, right? Is he laughing at that?
He says, LOL, it was live. It needs some more practice, but I like the open.
Smoothly running.
Hey, can you pull that out? I think that's fine. Let me twist this. Yeah, okay. All right, go ahead and open us with
All right,
prayer.
let's break here. We need it. Lord, tonight, just thank you for your word to us, for your gift of words that come from you, that are directed specifically to help us to know you, help us to know who we are, to know how to go out there and live. God, I just thank you for taking time to craft these things for us. So just help us as we open it up, as we look at it, Lord, to realize it's not just a dusty old book. It's not just something to give for Pastor ammunition on Sunday or Saturday, but it's what you want us to know. It's what you specifically crafted and gave to us so that we could be changed, so that we could know you. So God, just help us to understand your word, to value your word, and let your spirit do the teaching tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right. We'll try to remember as we go through this to.
Look at the camera,
No, I'm looking not at the camera.
not bells.
To let everyone know where we are in the Bible study. So if people tune in late, they know where we are. We are in Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 1. We finished Luke 13 last week. We are starting Luke 14 this week. And again, as always, it's a lot of dialogue from Jesus. We are continuing on with his encounters with people and what those encounters mean. These miraculous signs that Jesus does. They're not random. They have a specific meaning and a purpose, and we'll kind of dig into a little bit of those tonight. There's more to what's going on anywhere in Scripture, but especially with what Jesus is doing. There's always more there, so we need to dive deeper and find out what that is. So
It's like John says at the end of John, if we recorded everything, we wouldn't be able to keep all the books. But what is recorded, what is written, is not everything that Jesus did or said, but it's things that are indicative of truth and things that are profitable for us to know.
right. So you want me to read the first 6 verses, and then you
Sure.
can dig into them?
That works.
All right, Luke 14, starting at verse 1. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, He was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts of the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So, taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him away. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull him out?" And they had nothing to say. All right. Go back to the beginning and
the fact that Jesus is
unpack
invited to
this
dinner at
thing.
the Pharisees' house right now is significant to some extent because they've already kind of declared that they weren't backing Jesus. And that's not to say that their motives here were necessarily pure in having Jesus, but they must have still had some uncertainty, you know.
Right. This is not just any Pharisee. Luke specifically records it as a prominent Pharisee. So this is somebody important, powerful, influential, a bit of fame in the city, in the Jewish community, and this whole situation is being carefully watched by others, by the other Pharisees, by the Jewish power structure, people. This isn't going unnoticed. Is basically what's going on. This is,
And it is a fair chance that the man that was there that gets healed, they wouldn't have had someone ill in their presence, considered him maybe unclean. So he wouldn't have been at the dinner at the Pharisees' house unless there was a reason for him to be there, which was most likely so they could see if they could get Jesus to do something and see how it worked out.
right.
What's dropsy?
Dropsy, that is Peter Cottontail's sister. That's what always comes to mind for me.
Flopsy, mopsy, dropsy, and
flip-flopsy.
cottontail. I don't think that's one of them. No.
Maybe not.
I liked it though.
That's what always popped in my head. So what was dropsy? Did he always keep
Dropsy is what a lousy
Yeah.
NFL receiver does with the
Maybe
football.
it's the vapors.
Dropsy.
Yeah.
A what?
The vapors.
It's general edema. Their term was dropsy.
Water
So,
retention.
Water retention. So he could have had like congestive heart failure or kidney failure or something, but they had an expression, nothing so dry as a man with dropsy, because
He would have been
with it,
swollen, like
Yeah.
swollen arms, swollen ankles, swollen legs, swollen face. He would have looked very, very puffy.
right, and one of the symptoms of it is an insatiable thirst. So even though your body is just filled with water, you can't get enough to drink. You're always thirsty. You're literally drowning in your own fluids, and you can't get rid of this thirst.
Right.
That's what dropsy was, and exactly what was causing that, I don't know. And at that point, they probably may not have known there's an underlying cause, but that's what the guy had. And it's interesting. Another expression that they had back then, or another thing they would use, people who were greedy, they would use dropsy as a euphemism for that, because they were flooded in water, but they were still thirsty. Same thing with a greedy man.
They
They
couldn't get enough money, couldn't get enough things, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a little bit of a commentary on Jesus' opponents, because they could have well been described that way. So the man with dropsy comes in, and Jesus looks at him, and he looks at the Pharisees, and he probably thinks, okay, this is what I'm here for, so what should I do?
Right.
And it's interesting that Jesus does this a lot. He doesn't just do it, and he also doesn't just say, yeah, just so you know this is okay, but he looks at them and says, so what should I do? Is this okay? He puts the ball in their court. He asks them a question.
Well, right. So dinner wasn't really the MO for inviting him over.
No,
They invited him over under the guise of dinner, but it was really for something else. And being the pastor, that's happened to me before.
No.
Yes. I remember one time specifically, we were invited to dinner, and we were just expecting dinner. But when we got there, the husband divided off with me, and the wife divided off with Mickey, and the reason we were there was to settle an argument about a TV show that one of them was watching and the other one thought they shouldn't be watching. And it was like, seriously? So this was an ambush, not a dinner. That's what they're doing to Jesus.
Yeah.
He's in, oh, come on over for dinner. But then he comes in and there's a dropsy guy standing there with the Pharisee going, hey, look what I got you.
Where'd he come
And
from?
Jesus is like, oh, so this is the game. And then he asks the question, right?
Yeah, yeah. And again, the guy with dropsy, I mean, he doesn't care. He got healed.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I heard something today that kind of struck me. It was Bill Gaither. It was an interview with Bill Gaither I was listening to. But he says, when people tell me, well, he said, I'll get old truckers will come in. It's like, are you Bill Gaither? Yeah. He goes, well, I listen to you. You know, I'm not religious. You know, but I listen to you. And he says, I usually tell him I'm not really religious either. He said, I know one guy. I told him, you know, Jesus got crucified for not being religious.
It's true.
That's pretty good.
That's actually
You know,
good.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exactly what you see here. You know. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because the Pharisee represents religion. It's something that started out good, but man got involved and ruined it, and now it's so tainted it's functionless at this point. And then there's God. You couldn't get any purer than that. So you've got the severely tainted, dysfunctional form of what God originally had intended. They're together, and we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I think we tend to do that even today. Is we focus so much on, well, there was this revival and stuff's going on there, so people go to that place. You know, it's like we focus so much on where God was or what God said before that we forget about that He's still here and doing something else now. You know, Jesus was like, hey, this guy needs healing in this moment, I'll heal him. You know, and they're worried about what was said in Deuteronomy.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's important too. I remember there was a specific revival happening when I was in seminary. And it was very popular. Everyone in America was talking about it. And a lot of things were going on there. And I was actually, this was my brush with greatness, I was actually moving furniture for the superintendent, the general superintendent for the assemblies, like our Pope.
Mm-hmm.
If we had he's called the general superintendent.
Yeah.
The GS, we call him. So I'm driving to pick up. I did that. Wow! My brush with greatness again.
See?
So I'm driving to pick up. We got furniture in the back, and it was really cool that we got to do this. He didn't hire Mayflower movers. He used free labor from the church, which I thought was very good. Because we were in Springfield, and he was a part of the church where we went and stuff. So, and I was interning, so apparently that was a good choice to move his furniture.
There you go.
But anyway, I'm sitting in the truck with him, and he's asking me. He says, "What do you think about this revival? You being a seminary student, what do you think about this?" And I'm like, "Oh man, how do I answer this? This is going to make or break me, right?"
Uh-huh.
And I don't even remember what I said. But he was he was very cautious about it, because everyone was leaving their churches and going to this place because that's where God was.
Yeah.
And his response was, well, isn't God in their church?
Mm-hmm.
Should be.
Yeah.
Right? God should be there. And that's, yeah. So we need to be careful. And Jesus is kind of teaching that lesson to the Pharisees, because they're trying to draw him off. They're trying to get him to do something maybe that they can say is blasphemous. They're looking for a reason to kill him, to bring him down. And he's always one step ahead. We've read before that Jesus knows the hearts of men. So he knows what's happening. Windows are the eyes to the soul, or the eyes are the windows to the soul. And he looks at the Pharisee and he's like, I know the question you're going to ask before you ask it. So now I'm going to ask you a question about your question.
Yeah.
I'm one step ahead of you. And so.
Yeah, and as often happens when Jesus asks them a question, is lawfully heal on the Sabbath, they just look at him and don't say anything. Like, I don't have an answer for that. I know what the law says, but I don't know why it says it or where it's going or anything, because they weren't concerned about what it meant, just what it said. But Jesus does something here that kind of seems random, but if you remember in chapter 13, he loosed this woman on the Sabbath, and then he went on to say, well, if you have an ox that's bound on the Sabbath, are you going to let it loose so it can get a drink of water? He said, I loosed her on the Sabbath just like you loose your ox.
Yeah.
So here he says, if what you have is a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath, will you not immediately pull him out? Well, you're going to let your ox drown because it's the Sabbath, or you're going to pull him out? You peel back a layer of that, and Jesus would look at him saying, this guy was drowning on the Sabbath, and I pulled him out.
The guy with dropsy was full of water, and yet he was thirsty. And you said before he was drowning in his own fluid.
Yeah.
And then he uses an analogy of an ox or a child falling into a well and drowning.
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying, is there really a difference?
Yeah. So
Would
that's
you
not
help
just a
them?
random analogy.
No.
It applies. Yeah. It's like, obviously you wouldn't let your son drown because it's the Sabbath. Well,
And his two questions, his first question, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? And Jewish law, is it? No. Jewish law,
if it's considered work, then you can't do it.
then you're not supposed to. That's what they kept telling Jesus. You can't do that. That's work. You can't do that on the Sabbath. So Jesus is saying, on one hand, you're telling me, because you're a legalist, you're telling me no. But on the other hand, you absolutely would do that work to save someone, an ox, a farm animal, or your child.
Right.
So, which one is it, fellas?
Mm-hmm.
Because you use it at your convenience, which isn't really appropriate.
No, they said, their thought was, if it's an emergency, you can do it on the Sabbath, but if it can wait until tomorrow, then it waits. So it's like, if I have the authority, the power to save this guy today, I have to wait till tomorrow.
Right.
I'm doing the same thing you're doing, is what he's telling them. Just, you don't get to decide, well, this is an emergency, this is not. If you can save somebody, you save them.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that the work of God? Yeah. Why are they legislating the heart and the work of God? They're literally, they've taken it and they've made rules and codes and edicts all around it, and God's like, it's not that hard. He needs help. I help him. We don't need 613 rules on what I cannot do to help this person.
Right.
So thanks for ruining my plan, fellas. It's not that hard.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah.
And his one command, love your neighbor as yourself, right, that he leaves them with. If this were you, wouldn't you want someone to help you? Yes. Then you should help him too.
Yeah.
What you got?
Well, if Jesus, then again, after Jesus says that, they have nothing to say. These are the brave and influential leaders that stand in front of Israel and tell them how to live, and they got nothing to say. They can't argue with them. I guess I think that's part of the problem that the Pharisees had with them, is they were the teachers of the law. They were the people didn't know, and Jesus repeatedly looks at them and twists the law or sets straight the law, and they get twisted up, and they don't know what to say. They're the guys who are supposed to have the answers, and he continues to stump them time and time again.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think at this point they would know better than to try this, because it's never worked.
No.
In any encounter, it's never worked. They lay a trap. They plot something for Jesus. They pull the cord and set up the trap, and it never works. It's like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. It's like, it's not gonna work, guys. Every time the Roadrunner beats you.
Yep.
Every time.
I listened to Alan Jackson. He's a good preacher, not the singer, preacher.
Oh,
pretty good.
okay.
But he referred to it as they wanted to play Jeopardy with Jesus. It's like, how do you think that's going to turn out?
He knows all the answers.
Yeah, I think you're not going to win.
So go ahead. We're still at the dinner.
Yep. It's still at the dinner, verse 7. Chapter 14, verse 7. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this man your seat. Then, humiliated, you'll have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted.
I like that.
Yeah.
And again, first thing he does is he observes human nature, and then he comments on it. Right?
Yeah.
He observes the room. He notices how the guests pick the places of honor at the table. So the people come in, they're at a prominent Pharisee's house. It says everyone's watching this, so the buzz is people know who's there, right? This is like a social event. This is the Instagram and Twitter people. I mean, I was at, Pharisee Jim's house, and I got to sit right up next to him at the table. And here's a picture of us, and that's what they're doing. They're getting the best spot so that later they can tell the story and they can be important in it. And Jesus is observing this. And then he tells the tale about how when you're at an event like this, here's how you should actually behave, not how you fools are doing.
Yeah. There's a scene in Spies Like Us where they're all doctors. And
Gary?
Yeah, and they're all coming to
prouder. He has some movie brownies. That a boy.
They come in and they're like, doctor. It's like, it's ridiculous. And that's just what they remind me of. But Roman society was built on this whole patronage and status thing, where it's like, I invite you to dinner to my house and you come to me, but then you invite me to dinner to your house, kind of pay that back, and then we invite this other important person to dinner so we can prove how important we are. And it was all about status.
Right. And the seats closest to whoever the person was throwing the dinner. So the prominent Pharisee, let's say he's at the head of the table. The seats closest to him, to his left and right, and closest down the table would have been the seats of greatest honor. And diminishing honor, the farther away from him it got, until the person way down at the end would have been the least important.
Right.
So people, when they get there, are like, I get this chair, and they're all grabbing their chairs real quick. Jesus' response is, well, you're all grabbing your chairs, and Joe Schmo from Kokomo, he's grabbed the chair right next here, but when the Pharisee comes in, who is his party, he's going to look at Joe Schmo from Kokomo and go, I don't want you there. I want Carl from New York to sit there. So you go back there. Carl, come on up here. You sit here. And then Joe Schmo looks like an idiot because he's just been dismissed.
Exactly.
So he's saying, don't do that. Sit back there, and then let the fool up here, because then he's going to say, no, you know what? The guy back there, who no one ever notices, you know what? Today I want him to sit up here because he deserves it. And then you get to come up here, and then suddenly, yay for you. Yeah. So,
which is still about, pet my ego.
Right.
And it is. This is something we're not told, but if I had to venture a guess, where do you think Jesus was sitting at this dinner table?
Probably right up at the front guest of honor seat.
Yeah, probably all the way at the opposite end, away from the most important person. Yeah, they probably invited Jesus and said, "Oh no, you sit over there to keep."
Because this isn't about you. It is about you, but by putting you back there, we're making it not about you, which is what we want people to think about you. Nothing. We brought you here to let everyone know you're nothing. That's the games. All the gamesmanship, all this chess that they're playing, and they're lousy at it. They're lousy chess players, aren't they?
Well, they don't understand the game. They're playing checkers, and he's playing chess.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Because they're just used to doing things the way they do it. And he's doing a new thing, and they don't get it.
No.
Yeah. Now, verse 12, then Jesus said to his host, When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. This is another thing that they didn't do, is they wouldn't let those people in their house, let alone invite them to dinner. I mean, why would I invite somebody to dinner that can't repay it? I mean, why would that benefit me?
Right, this hasn't changed in thousands of years.
No.
We do the same thing. We help the people who don't need it. And the people who do need it, we don't help. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
We do stuff because we'll get something from it. We'll have a dinner so we can make a contact or a connection and ask a favor, and that helps us out. I'll have you to dinner, and you help me with the business deal. And so everybody gets a little something out of the deal. That's how it works. And Jesus is saying, give something to someone who can't give you anything back. You're not getting anything from them. You're simply giving to them. You're blessing them, and that is where it should end.
Yeah, that's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, pull out the Monopoly game, and it's like you give everybody back and forth, but at the end everybody has the same thing they had when they started. Nothing changes.
Right. Yeah.
That's the game they're playing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rearranging the furniture. It's not doing anything different,
Right.
really.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff. You're just moving it in a circle.
Yeah. 3 things I wrote in this section as notes. The first thing, because they're all about status and honor. That's all they really are looking at and care about. The first one is honor is given by others, not taken for oneself. So the guy who wants to sit in the front seat and be the man, it's like Jesus tells him, no, you don't take honor. You're given honor. Honor is paid to you. You do something else to get honor. You don't just try to grab it. And that runs counter to our society and their society. Watch a political commercial if you don't want to see somebody try to grab honor.
You're right. That is that's a subtle point too. People will try to say, give me, or I deserve honor, give me honor, and I should be honored, and that's not how it works. It comes from someone else, and they have to give it to you, not coerced, not forced. It's got to be legitimate. Yeah.
Yeah. And honor is not gained by the pursuit of honor, but rather by the pursuit of humility. If you want to be honored, try to pursue humility. Be humble, and you will be honored. And that runs counter to what they believed completely, and again, what most of our world believes today. It's like, I want to be the man, I'm going to show you I'm the man, I'm going to tell you I'm the man, so you know that I'm the man, not
Right.
I'm going to work hard, I'm going to help others, and then you're going to see that I'm the man.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what Jesus is telling them.
Yeah. Quietly going about doing the right thing. And if nobody knows but you and God, that's enough. Right?
Yep. And again, status is not given to be used as influence in getting more status, but rather it's to be used as an opportunity to serve those without status.
Yes.
And he's telling them, hey, instead of inviting all your rich friends to your dinner, why don't you invite people that don't have?
Yeah. I think we even kind of hit on that before. God's given you all this stuff, and he's asking you, what are you doing with it? Is all that stuff that you're holding in your hands, who is that for? Who's it for? And Jesus is looking right at you, and he's asking us, who's that for?
Yeah. And again,
he's telling us
yeah,
who that's for.
yeah, I see a parallel still, to politicians of any party. They have no status until they get elected, and then they go to Washington and then they get status, and they use their status to gain more status, not to help the people that got them elected in the first place.
No, and they go to the dinners where they have a guy come sit by him and say, hey, I'm Senator, you, Joe, come sit at my dinner party, and then you have this business and this constituency, and you're going to do a favor for me, and I'm going to do a favor for you. And that's the kind of dinner Jesus is saying
That's exactly right. That's what the Pharisees were doing.
and you're right, that's exactly what DC is about. These guys go in there, they get a little power, they go power hungry, they use it to manipulate, they use it to get more power, and we talked about that. People with power think that power is their power to use to get more power. And Jesus is like, that's not at all what your power is for.
Okay.
Your power should be leveraged for someone who doesn't have any. Jesus leveraged all of heaven's power for us, for our sin, because there was no way we were going to get home without it.
No.
No way. We were sunk without it. So he took all his power and leveraged it for the powerless, us. Yeah. Does anyone here have questions at all about anything? Bill's back in Mickey's head said
Pretty
good.
good.
Okay.
I think you're doing pretty good.
Oh,
Is Gary doing good
You're
too?
hitting it right on the head.
there you go. Not hitting me on the head, hitting it on the head.
All right.
Proverbially. Proverbially, you got that. Verse 15 is kind of a response to what Jesus has said in verse 14. Jesus says, although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. And then somebody says, when one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, blessed is the man who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God. So he's thinking, hey, the resurrection of the righteous thing. Yeah, blessed is the man who gets to go to that. Tell me how to get to that. Who do I have to invite to dinner to go there? And then Jesus replied in verse 16.
This guy, because now they're seeing this feast at the Pharisees' house, this important religious feast at a religious man's house, and they're all jockeying for the best seat.
Yeah.
And he's thinking, oh man, imagine if this was the wedding supper of the Lamb, boy, I'd really be fighting to get that seat then. And it's like, well, you're not approaching this any differently than this feast. That's not what I want you to see.
No.
They're trying to show how spiritually plugged in and how astute and aware they are. And in the process of opening their mouth, they're actually showing how unaware they are. So Jesus fixes that.
Yeah. He goes on in verse 16. Jesus replied, a certain man was preparing a great banquet.
Another story?
Yeah.
He's always telling stories. I love that. Okay.
And he invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent a servant to tell those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, I've just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me. Another said, I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me. Still another said, I just got married and I can't come. So the servant came back and reported to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. And sir, the servant said, what you ordered has been done, but there is still room. Then the master told the servant, go out to the roads and the country lanes and make them come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. What's that story all about?
Well, I know what it's about, but
Yeah.
what do they think it's about?
They think it's about dinner.
No, it's not. It's really not about dinner. See, the Bible says that Jesus came to his own, but his own rejected him. They received him not, right? So he is going to have this party, and there's specific people he wants to come. And he says, come. And they said, no thanks. So then he goes and gets some other people instead. Yeah.
Yeah.
And who do the Pharisees represent? What particular group of people at the time? The Jews, right?
Yeah.
The Jews. And who were the people that Jesus came to first? Jesus comes from the Jews, as a Jew, to the Jews. He's at a table with the Pharisees, but they really don't want him. They don't want to have any part of what he's doing. They're rejecting him. He's there so that they can mock him and make a spectacle of him.
Yeah.
They are not receiving him,
No.
are they?
No. I'm going to read you Deuteronomy 20, starting in verse 5. The officers shall say to the army, has anyone built a new house and not dedicated it? Let him go home, or he may die in battle. And has someone else may dedicate it? Has anyone planted a vineyard and not begun to enjoy it? Let him go home, or he may die in battle and someone else enjoy it. Has anyone become pledged to a woman and not married her? Let him go home, or he may die in battle and someone else marry her. And then there's another passage that talks about if the man is married and he's just gotten married, then send him home instead of sending him off to war. This is a little bit of a parody here because these are kind of the same reasons, same excuses.
See, they're not reasons. They're what?
Excuses.
They're excuses.
But the
They
difference
should come, but
is
they don't.
they're talking about going to war here.
Right.
Jesus is talking about going to dinner here. So Jesus is saying, you see what these guys did? They took what God said about going to war and they're twisting it to not go to dinner instead because they don't feel like it. The Pharisees are taking what God said and they're twisting it to use for what they feel like. They're doing the exact same thing as what Jesus is telling them these people are doing.
It's what they did best, though.
Yeah.
They would take, again, I've used this illustration before, the law of Korban. If you had money and your parents needed some, and came to you and said, son, Mom and I really need some money for our meds are so expensive, we need some help. The son could say, oh, Mom, Dad, I would love to help you, but, I dedicated all my money to God, and so I can't. Now, if I actually give it to you, then I'd be breaking my oath. So I'm going to have to keep it, and you're just going to have to work that out on your own. That was a way for these wealthy Jewish people to keep their money.
Yep.
They weren't really dedicating it to God. They would say the oath and say, oh yeah, I did that, but then they would use it for their own benefit so that they could keep their money and not be generous and helpful with it. So they're using the law, which the Pharisees are doing here, to mean something it wasn't meant to mean because they can manipulate it and use it to their benefit rather than what it was originally intended for.
Yeah.
And no church does that today.
No, not at all. Again, and I've said this before, the church, and that, italics, the church kind of big, not God's true church, but the church in what it has become in this world, reminds me an awful lot of the Pharisees.
Yeah.
See, we have taken what Jesus gave us and done to it exactly what the Pharisees did to what God gave them, by and large. Not every church, not the true church, but it's kind of where the church is in our world today.
Yeah. Yes.
It's all rules and it's all this and it's all for my gain, and I wouldn't pastor that church because they can't pay me enough. And
yeah.
It's that commentary, but it's there.
No, it's true. And more than once, I've seen a pastor in a large ministry, in a large church, a pastor that's very visible, that's very prominent, that's making a lot of money off of video appearances and conferences and book sales. And they'll acquiesce to something that isn't right instead of standing up for God's word because they're afraid they'll lose their prestige, they'll lose their book sales, they might not be popular anymore. So they will sell out God so that they can sell themselves. And it stinks, Gary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You need to trust him enough to say, even if I do lose it, the end is my focus. Not this. Not the Pharisees' dinner, but the big dinner at the end. So.
You can't read any of the Gospels and what Jesus went through and think to yourself, if I stick to God's word, that it's always going to be accepted and I'm always going to be popular. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
Well, it didn't work for Jesus and he was God, right? So
Exactly.
no. So that's clearly not going to work.
No, the world is not going to accept it at times.
Did he say something like, if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you? Something
to that
like
effect,
that.
yeah.
So it's not a secret then?
No.
Yeah. And yet, we still screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
We're special, aren't we?
Yeah, good thing God's patient.
I was going to say, we so need a Savior so bad, Gary, so bad.
Repetitively,
Oh.
yes.
All right.
And then God goes out and fills this banquet, first with the lame and the poor and the crippled and the blind, and then with anybody he can find. So Jesus, and they're going to miss this completely, but Jesus is telling them not only are the people that are at this feast not the ones that got invited in the first place, but the people that aren't at this feast are ones that chose not to be there. And that's the fact when it comes to the wedding supper of the Lamb, when it comes to being with Christ. Ultimately, in the end, is the people that are not there, the people that chose not to be there.
Right. And it's interesting. It's almost a picture of Jesus' ministry. He comes to the Jews don't receive him. The Pharisees, he's arguing, fighting with them all the time. They don't want to have anything to do with him.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes out, and while he's out there, he's healing the sick and the lame and the blind as his ministry. He's drawing those people in, the least desirable. Those are the first contact that he has out there. And then, when he's all done with that, he sends his disciples out into the world to get everybody else, all the Gentiles, all the non-Jews who nobody would touch with a 10-foot pole, go bring them in. And that's what he's doing here. He starts out with the invited guests, then he goes and gets the sick, and then he goes and gets anybody and everybody else.
Okay. And this is, here it looks like this guy's just doing it for spite, just doing it because he couldn't get the people he wanted. But, you go all the way back to Abraham and see God promise that all the nations in the world will be blessed. So, it's not like God's just settling for who's left at this point. This is, what God intended in the first place. But to the Israelites, that's what's going on, because they were his people first, and if God would spurn them for other people, he's settling, it's just because you were born Jewish, you were it,
Right.
That's the way they learned it, thought it.
Verse 25, Luke 14, verse 25. You got that one?
Sure. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father or mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple."
Let's just pause there, because there's a lot of heavy stuff going on.
So that's just like what you hear when you listen to a ministry or something and people are trying to get you to join their church, right? Jesus tells them all about the good stuff and encouragement and stuff. Yeah.
He does.
It's a membership drive.
Yep. It is. It's all fun.
Yeah.
Being a Christian, when you become a Christian, it is like you get a free pass to Disney, Gary. It is. You see unicorns, there's cotton candy clouds, Skittles in your cereal bowl. It is nice. You smell good all the time. You don't even have to shower. It's insane. Your hair gets better. You don't even need glasses anymore, Gary. It is so good when you become a Christian. Or none of what I just said is true at all. None of it. And that's the case, by the way. So what he's saying is, when you come to me, it's a decision. And we talked about this before. The gray leaves. There's right or wrong, yes or no.
Yeah.
Two sides. There's not the gray in the middle anymore, where you can sit and ride the fence. So when you decide to follow me, some people are going to not like that. They're going to hate you. Maybe your mom, maybe your dad, maybe your brother. He even says, I've come to divide mother against daughter, father against son, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not saying he's coming because he wants you to fight. He's saying when I come and you make a decision and choose a side, that's what's going to happen. In eternity, there's two sides, those with me and those not with me. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, So what he's saying is, if your dad gets mad at you because you're following me and you want your dad's approval more than mine, and you say, okay, Dad, I won't follow Jesus anymore. I'll stay home with you and work the farm. Then you love your dad more than Jesus. Well, Pastor, you're supposed to love your dad more than Jesus. Jesus is saying, if you don't love me most of anything, it's like you love me and you love me more than your dad. He's basically saying, you're going to have to love me more than your dad. You're going to have to love me more than your mom. You're going to have to love me more than your sister and your brother. And he uses hate as to the different love and hate. You're going to have to love me and hate your dad. Love me, not really hate them, but you can't be acquiesced to them, right?
Read that word right there.
Apostasetai.
That's the Greek word there for hate.
Apostate.
It comes from two words, apo meaning from, and tasso, which means to properly arrange. So it's not like the hate word that we have. It's a different Greek word, because they had all kinds of different words that we only have one word for.
So is he saying you have to prioritize those relationships?
Exactly what he's saying, yeah.
Me first. Well, Pastor, that sounds insane. So are you saying that you got to give up your family if you're going to follow Christ? Yep.
You got to prioritize.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
We've all had friction from people that we used to be friends with when we got saved and became a Christian, who suddenly we weren't anymore because they thought we were crazy. Mm-hmm. You're a Jesus freak now. I don't want to be friends with you. It's like, okay, well, because I'm sticking with Jesus. I'm not going to give up Jesus just to get your lousy friendship back, because you weren't that great to begin with, buddy. Right?
Yeah.
But that's basically what he's saying. And then he says, even his own life, hate your own life. You've got to be willing, Jesus says this, you've got to be willing to pick up your cross and follow me. What is the cross? The cross is a symbol of
Crucifixion.
Yep. Crucifixion and death. You've got to be willing to lay down your own life and pick up mine. You've got to be willing to die for me, or you're not worthy to follow me. You've got to be all in, or you're not in. That's hard. And I'm not saying that. Jesus is saying that. And so all these people, like everybody's in. We're all in the big, happy marshmallow family. No, we're not. We're not. That's a myth.
Yeah.
I'd love it to be true, but if that's true, then Jesus didn't have to die. Then his death, then his sacrifice for us wouldn't have been necessary. If he just loved us all and we were all in automatically. Well, God loves everybody's going to heaven. Because Jesus came, so everybody gets to go now. No, they don't. Only the ones who choose to surrender everything for what he did for you and give your life fully to him, then you go.
Yeah.
But again, that's why we don't have, a big church, because people don't like to hear that. And then they go to the church that tells them what they want to hear, and then they're happy and on their way to hell. And I'd rather you not be on your way to hell. So, yeah. Welcome back, Wendell.
Thank you. And perspective-wise, for us, we can't think about anyone who carry his cross we can't think about that and not see Jesus carrying his cross, But to these people, that hadn't happened yet.
No.
They don't have that perspective. It means something a little different to them than what it does to us.
He's doing it again. He's revealing the end of the story, but nobody gets it but us.
Yeah.
Because we know the end. They don't know it
We're
yet.
looking back across it, so it's easier for us. Yeah. So follow me and carry his cross. Jesus would literally carry his cross at some point, but they don't know that yet.
I wasn't thinking about that. The last thing on their mind, the last thing that they would think of is that this guy is going to die to Roman crucifixion on a cross.
Yeah.
I bet that was never on their mind at all. That was
Yeah.
the farthest thing. This guy was going to bring revolution. He was going to bring people together. They were going to overthrow Rome, and he was going to take the throne, and he's going to be the benevolent king we've all wanted and get rid of Rome. That's what's going to happen.
Well, yeah.
And at the end of the day, Rome kills him. They never thought that was happening.
No.
He's all in. We
Yeah.
need to be all in too. I want to be a part of a team that's that dedicated, that is that focused, that is that selfless, that is that determined. That's a model for anybody, for any man or woman to be more like that.
Committed. Yeah.
You should talk. I talk too
Okay,
much.
I'll read.
Okay.
Still in Luke 14, verse 28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, "This fellow began to build and was not able to finish." Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he's not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple.
Man, again, he's making it really hard.
Consider the cost before you make the decision. This runs counter to every salvation message you're going to hear on the radio or the TV or a podcast today, which is come and be saved, and God's going to do this for you, and God's going to do that for you, and blah blah blah, and it's all true. But Jesus is saying, before you make this choice, consider the cost.
Yeah,
We don't do that anymore because we're worried people might consider the cost.
No, because he's saying you have to be willing, you have to be able to pay it and finish. Jesus paid it and finished. He didn't go halfway to the cross and then decide, I don't have as much guts as I thought I did, so I'm not going to be able to finish this, and you're going to have to work it out some other way. He didn't do that. There's a house that we've seen a number of times. It's on the water. It's not near here. It's farther south, but it's on the water. And the guy looks like he had started it, and he was building a castle. It's like stone with some turrets, and it's with a lighthouse fixture on it. Very cool looking, but it's half done and kind of abandoned, just sitting there. And it was a great idea and a great start, but he ran out of money, and there it sits as a testimony to his inability to properly analyze his ability to complete a project. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now it's a monument to not finishing. And it's sad. And Jesus is saying the same thing. If you're going to build something, and he's not talking about towers. He's using towers as an analogy for us. Do you count the cost that it's going to take to follow me? How much is it going to cost? Not necessarily in money, but in what's it going to cost in friends, in family that are going to leave you or mock you. What about your job, your status, your shop? People aren't going to come to your shop anymore. You're going to go out of business now because you're a crazy Jesus follower. So you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose that, and then you're not going to be able to make your house payment. You're going to lose your house. Count the cost. This is what it's going to cost. Can you do all that and follow me? Can you finish it? Can you pull it off? Can you go all the way to the finish line, or are you going to quit halfway and be unfinished? Which is, that's the problem with so many people. I mean, I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. A good start and a lousy finish.
Yeah.
We've started 100 things, finished one.
There's nothing around my house that started not completed.
Mine either.
Talking about
Mine either. Drive past my house. There's currently scaffold set up and a half-painted house right now.
Oh, not even half.
See? Well, I only started yesterday, so. But yeah, so hopefully I actually will be able to finish that. That would be nice. But,
The thing is, when you become a Christian, and obviously none of what we're saying negates the fact that you need to make that choice, because there's only two sides when it comes to that day. You're either in or you're out,
Right.
But you kind of become a square peg when you become a Christian. You don't fit in that round hole anymore. you're different. This world isn't where you're meant to be.
No.
So you don't quite fit, and you feel like you don't quite fit.
Why is that?
It's because you're not supposed to.
Correct.
And the more we live and the more the world wears at us, we kind of find a place where we fit and we get comfortable. And all that is the world wearing off our squareness and making us round again. And if we feel like we fit in this world, then you need to go back and get redefined, because
Yeah.
you're supposed to be a square peg.
Yep.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
This world should be uncomfortable. It should make us ill sometimes, because it's not following what God wants.
Right. Scripture refers to us as aliens or pilgrims.
Yeah.
Those are, that means we don't live here, this isn't our home, and we're on our way to our home as a pilgrim. We don't live here. Our problem is we pitch our tent halfway along the way. That's what Moses brings him to the Jordan River. And then, he sends Joshua and Caleb across to scout out the promised land that God said, this is yours, this is where I want you to be. But there were some that thought, no, it's pretty good on this side. I'm just going to stay here. And they were that close, and they fell short. Because what God wanted was on the other side of the river for them. But they were afraid to go that little bit further, so they didn't get it. And that's pretty sad. What's that old saying? Well begun is half done. Well, it rhymes and it sounds nice and it looks good on a poster, but Jesus is saying, what's well done? Finished is well done.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Let's not do this, make you feel good and, this is a good start.
Yeah.
You didn't ever do nothing, did ya?
Nope.
No! That's Jesus is like, nope, we can't live that way. If you're going to follow me, it has to be done all the way. And it's going to cost. Figure that out. Can you pay the cost?
Yeah, but the cost is greater not paying that cost.
It is.
Yeah.
But-
Yes, but not when you're in love with the world.
Well, that's the catch, is that cost is down the road. It's like buying everything on credit. It's like, wow, yeah, I can make the minimum payment. It's like, yeah, but sooner or later that bill catches up with you. And we're looking at the minimum payment. We live in this world and we're doing this and we're having fun. We're making that minimum payment. We don't realize what's hanging over our head. We just don't know it.
Yeah, and it's hard for some people to give up this, because the temporal, the mortal, the world, all that we have here, because it's all we know. For something, Hebrews 11:1, faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you cannot see. You have to be so certain of that none of this matters, that this pales in comparison to the promise at the end. And that's got to be so bright and so enticing and drawing you so hard that the world, that you can withstand it and resist it and stay focused on the goal. Paul talks about that. Run the race, focus on the goal, don't drift, don't get distracted. Because if you do, you lose. You're gonna lose. And losing in this game is eternal. It's forever. Most important thing you can ever do is what we're talking about right here.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
And inside time and outside of time. Ever.
Yeah. I mean, be aware it's not going to be easy all the time, but it's the only choice you can make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not promising you Skittles and rainbows, but we're promising you eternal life. So.
Right. Yeah. And Scripture says it's more than you could ask or imagine. So I can ask for a lot. I can imagine pretty big. Well, guess what? It's better than that.
Yep.
Better than that.
Let's finish these last two verses.
Let's do it.
Verse 34, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's fit neither for the soil nor the manure pile. It's thrown out. He who has an ear, let him hear. And this goes back to, you're going to be a square peg. And one of the more profound nuggets I ever got out of a sermon, you get certain little things that stick with you. And one that I got from a guy preaching on this pulpit right here and sitting next to me, but don't tell him. He said,
This isn't an Andy Jackson or...
No, this is a Bradford Davison. He said if
I
you
heard
want
he's a
to fit
little
in,
sketchy.
if you're trying to be like everybody else, then you're striving to be average.
Yeah.
Like if you really want to fit in, you really want to be just like everybody else, is that what you really want, is to be average? God's calling you to be more than average. If you're a square peg, He's calling you to stay square, because that's the way He made you. And that's what Jesus is telling him here. I made you salty, stay that way.
Yeah. Because you can't get it back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, salt. If salt wasn't salty, I don't know how that would happen, but let's say it did. What would it be then?
Unsalty. Well,
Would it be just like a white powder that did nothing? It'd be
without
pointless and useless, and how do you make it salty again if it loses that? Same with us. We have a purpose, right?
yeah, without too much digression, their salt wasn't like our salt where you pull out and it's pure salt. Their salt tasted different based on where it came from because it had different impurities. The salt you got in Capernaum was not going to taste the same as the salt you got in Galilee. It was different stuff.
Right.
And the older their salt got, the less it was salty, and the more it tasted like those impurities.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Hunks of salt from, they could, get salt from the Dead Sea, which would have tasted, maybe a little sea-ish, salty, fish-ish, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, it was different because they didn't purify it like we do. It wasn't the same stuff, So over time, it could lose its saltiness.
Yeah.
Stay salty.
Yeah. Yeah. What did they call the old hymn books in the old churches? Psaltery?
Salter.
Yeah. Those were the song books, because they gave, they preserved, they gave life, and to the story of Jesus and faith, and they were the salt songs, I guess. Salty the Singing Songbook.
I literally was
Salty,
just
yeah.
thinking, and 25 years later, I understand Hayden's Halloween costume.
See, we have arrived.
You've got some pretty sweet pictures of him in a Salty the Singing Songbook.
Yes,
costume
I
for
remember
Halloween.
Salty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, salt from the Dead Sea probably wouldn't taste like fish because there aren't any fish in there, but
Yeah, it would just taste dead.
dead.
I don't know.
Was it good? I'm a fan of salt. I had salt. I literally had salt before I came here tonight.
Did you have anything with it or just salt?
Salad.
Salted and stuff.
Mickey drives her nuts because no matter what she gives me or no matter
You
where
salt
we
it
go to a
first.
restaurant, the first thing I do is salt it and then taste it. Drives her nuts. You didn't even taste that. It's like,
After I seen that.
I'm eating it anyway, all right? Even after it's fine. I'll be good. I'll
It
eat it.
keeps me from taking things off his plate, though.
So, all right.
All right, that's the whole chapter.
All right, we finished chapter 14. We'll pick up Luke chapter 15 next week. Saturday, if you want to come to church live, our service starts at 6 o'clock live here in the sanctuary. The first portion of the service, Saturday Night Funnies and worship, we don't broadcast because of copyright, and Facebook would probably not allow us to do that. So we broadcast the sermon only, which is at 6:30 on Saturday night. So it'll be part 2 in a new series. So we'll see you again, hopefully, Saturday night, 6:30 on the internet, 6 o'clock in real life. Want to close this with prayer?
We can do that.
Okay.
Lord, tonight, just again, thank you for your word. Thank you for everybody that's here, everybody that joined us, and just thank you for your character, for your love, for the fact that you know who we are, and you want us anyway. God, just help us to lean on you, to trust you, and to show other people, yeah, we may not be perfect, and we might be working at it and stuff, but we got a hold of something permanent here. Help us to share that, to share what it means and how freeing it can be. Yeah, just help us to share you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, you ready?
Sure.
We'll count 1, 2, 3, and then
3, 2, 1.
1,
On three or three and then,
3, and then,
okay.
okay. 1, 2, 3, good night.
So it's like 3 1/3.
Yeah.
Hold on, you're still live because
Still,
I can't get
say
the
something
mouse.
inappropriate now, Gary,
Is
like
it
the last
last,
time.
something inappropriate?
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, this would be great if I could get the cursor to.